I should sit down. It's 5:30. So you can use it. You've been doing it for years now.
Wait, I think there's one more. I think one more just went in.
Yeah. Oh, he called me and I didn't get some calls. I was on your meetings before.
You didn't get a copy?
No, I went to get off.
What he was asking about Jefferson Street, he wants to get Garden Associates $2,500 design sewer stuff.
For phase 8.
Good evening. It is 5:30, so we're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. I'd remind people to turn their cell phones to silent or vibrate, and then let's all please stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Our city clerk, Chris, will take the roll.
Councilmember Berg.
Here.
Councilmember Dalby.
Here.
Councilmember Rowe.
Here.
Councilmember Stevens.
Here.
Councilmember Strebe. Mayor Lazio.
Here. Need a motion for approval for tonight's agenda, even though it's a special meeting. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Can we just do that by acclamation? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We have a number of people who've asked to speak on the topic tonight. I was hoping to actually have the program first so that we could hear some comments and ideas and so forth, but we could start with taking these and hear your comments and then listen to the speaker. He's on his way. We just heard that. He's coming from Des Moines and hopefully will be here shortly. Are you comfortable making comments you want council to hear before we hear the program? I think so too, but I hate to make you wait. If you don't mind, let's. While we're waiting, I'll make one announcement. Like to recognize Councilwoman Holly Berg. She was recently elected president of the Central Iowa Tourism Region, and that's quite an accomplishment, and also gives us a good voice in Southeast Iowa here. So, Holly, on behalf of the council, we have high expectations. Holly's been very involved with the Tourism Bureau and certainly has given us good service here. So it's nice to have somebody that knows the tourism business and will help bring activity to our community. So thanks for doing that, Holly. Any word on our speaker?
Mayor, no. At this point, I spoke with him earlier this afternoon. At this point, I would recommend we go ahead and get started so we don't have to waste any more time. And I can lead us through the program and certainly have the folks in the audience come to the floor. But I'm comfortable with outlining the program.
Would you give us an overview of what we're talking about and what the speaker is going to address tonight? And then if there's any council comments, I'd like to hear those. And when the speaker gets here, we'll give him the opportunity to certainly give his presentation.
All right.
Okay.
Ready to get started?
Yep.
All right, Mr. Mayor and council, and then those in the audience. The council is giving some consideration to contracting out the rental inspections. At present, as you know, we do that in-house. That's handled by staff. This was a program that Iowa Inspectors has been doing for a number of years. And back in August, actually, my notes indicate the 23rd of August, myself, the mayor, Councilwoman Berg, heard a presentation by Jason Van Osdell with Iowa Inspectors at the university, as I recall. And essentially, that's what it amounts to, is we're looking at the cost and some of the perhaps savings on a staff level that we would see if we were able to, quite frankly, contract this out. I've seen this done in other communities. I managed a community once outside the Kansas City area, did the same thing. We contracted for rental inspection. So that's an item I'm asking council to give some consideration to. And this is not, as is indicated, this is a special meeting, so there are no votes that can be taken. And this is a good opportunity for those in the audience then, as I shared with you, Mayor, to share with us their questions and concerns about delving into this program a little bit further. There is a sheet. If I would have known, I would have generated more of these, but I'll be happy to hand these out. And if folks don't get it, this is quite frankly, a spreadsheet that Jody Gates put together for us. And it outlines the cost differentials between us doing this in-house and, again, contracting that service out. Iowa Inspectors has done this not only in Oskaloosa, they've also done it for some of the communities in the Des Moines metro area. And it's an item that I want council to give some consideration to moving forward, as to whether or not they want to vote on this and do this. Having said that, when you look at let's outline the fee structure a little bit here on the sheet. And again, my apologies for those that don't have the sheet in front of you. I'll be happy to provide it to you after the meeting. But if you look at the fee structure, the one we're looking at, the one that council has in front of him, and I asked Jason about doing a PowerPoint. He said that wasn't something he wanted to do. He was just going to speak from the podium. But if you'll note on the initial inspection fee, and this is comparing and contrasting what we have right now with what he is proposing, as it relates to that initial inspection fee, that initial fee, and I'll probably have Jody, you're still back there, right? Yes. So I'll probably have Jody come to the podium here in a little bit, and as I like to say, bat cleanup and provide the clarification on this. Right now, it's a $30 fee. What the Iowa inspectors do, their inspection fee is a $75 fee, and then they charge $25 for each additional unit, as it says. And they also do re-inspections, and for those, they charge $25. Jody, if I have this right, if I have this correct, on that initial first re-inspection, then we don't charge anything on that. Is that correct? Okay. And then, as my notes indicate, then after that initial re-inspection, the next one would be 30. Okay. So there's a pretty big cost differential. I don't deny that between the two entities. Let me explain to you, though, one of the items I want council to give some consideration to, and that's not only doing the re-inspections, but also what staff is tasked with right now in terms of building inspections, rental inspections, and code enforcement. And code enforcement is an area, this is just merely an opinion, although I believe the council members that have visited with me have shared this opinion as well, and that's the number of code enforcement officials we have in a community of our size. I came from a community that was half the size of this one, and we had 4 full-time code enforcement officers, full-time. And Jody, I may have to ask you to clarify this for me, but I think plus or minus, because we have folks then that are doing the building inspections, the rental inspections, and the code enforcement, it isn't like I've seen in a number of communities I've been in where you had people that their specific duty and only duty was code enforcement. So as it relates to the folks that are doing code enforcement and they're doing that, sharing this amongst the 2 other responsibilities, then I don't think it's fair to say that there's a static amount of folks that we have that are doing nothing but code enforcement. It is an area that certainly needs to be addressed more. And one of my takeaways from this is if we were able to hire a firm such as this to help do, not just help us, but conduct the rental inspections, my theory would be we would make available more of the folks that are in that division right now that are doing some of these rental inspections and push them down to doing more code enforcement. It's an area, again, that is sorely lacking. There is a cost differential certainly between them. If the city were to decide to hire Iowa inspectors, that there is no fee to the city. Their transactions are simply between themselves and the landlords. So those transactions take place. The city doesn't have their finger in that well. That's a transaction just like it is in Oskaloosa between them and again, those entities that are renting those particular units. With that, Mr. Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you again. Hopefully Jason will show up soon. I'll turn it back over to you to see if you, the council members, have any questions that either myself or Jody, or for that matter, Kevin, can help us answer.
Are there some questions from council that you want to bring up, or concerns or ideas that you've heard about? And
Your Honor, I just want a quick clarification on that. Delta is rather large, but also the frequency of the fee there shows that Iowa inspectors' fees paid once every 3 years versus the city's paid once every year. So that would also
Correct.
Draw that down quite a bit. So the delta would not be near as big as the way it sounds. It looks to me like, anyway. That's
right.
fine.
And Mr. Mayor, again, not to interrupt, I think it might be a good idea, and this is your call anyway, to invite Jody Gates to speak to the board. She was the one that put this spreadsheet together. In addition to that, I shared this with the folks at Iowa Inspectors, and they agreed as to all the numbers, quite frankly, being correct. So it may make some sense for perhaps Jody at this time to step forward, and she can speak about the cost differentials.
I think most of the people in the audience recognize Jody Gates, who has been in this position and is now doing some contract work for the city, and has a good historical background and a lot of knowledge of all of city programs. So Jody, welcome, and share anything you think would be helpful for us.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I did prepare the spreadsheet, and I tried to give you enough examples and comparisons so that you'd have a good feel for what we were talking about, because Iowa Inspections is planning on charging at the time of inspection. So if they did an inspection once every 3 years, they charge their fee then. And the city of Ottumwa charges a $30 per unit fee every year. And so, but we do an inspection for the rental property once every 3 years. And so it's difficult to compare apples and apples in this sense. But I think one of the things that that I'm struggling with trying to prepare a comparison is the city staff, the administrative staff, will still have to handle all the administrative work as far as notifying landlords to schedule a rental inspection, uploading those inspections, maintaining them, and doing that kind of work. And Iowa Inspections does the inspection work. And so if we're going to be paid for that administrative work, do we continue to be paid $30 per unit per year? Or do we try to figure out what we think it costs us every year to do the administrative work, and then try to implement a fee for administration and then a fee for the inspection? Because I think, as you can see, if we are charging $30 per unit per year, and they're charging $75 for an inspection, at the end of 3 years, then landlords are going to pay $165, as opposed to right now they'd pay $90 for a unit. And that's a single family dwelling. The Iowa Inspections group gives landlords a break if you've got more than one unit in a building. They charge you $75 for the first unit. They charge you $25 for each additional unit.
And Mr. Mayor, if I ask Jody a question on this one. Jody, one of the items we talked about this afternoon and outlining this is the $30 fee, and that, in fact, it's almost like a registration fee, and that comes to us, and that generates, you said, approximately $85,000 a year.
Yeah, based upon the number of registered rentals. I mean, we've got over 2,800 right now. We're approaching 2,900 pretty rapidly. So you're looking at $86,000 a year right now, based upon that number. And that fee is charged every year, but on the other side of it, and the inspections are only done one time in 3 years.
Right.
But we also do the reinspection, any needed reinspections. The first one is done at no charge. They have the option to charge for any re-inspections after that. I'm not sure that we do charge for all those re-inspections after that, depending upon whether it's a consult, whether it's a discussion between the inspector and the landlord, and they don't have to actually go out and do a physical re-inspection. But I think that the third-party company will charge for every re-inspection they have to go to.
Right. But on those, as you said, the first re-inspection, then we don't charge for that.
No.
Correct? And the subsequent re-inspections, are those again in that $30 continuum?
They can be $30 each. I honestly don't know how many times our inspectors charge for those re-inspections. I don't.
Okay.
I don't believe that they charge every time on the second re-inspection or the third. It's their discretion to do that, but they can.
Right. If they do that, though, if they're making a number of re-inspections, as you said, that could be, depending on how many times they come back, that could be a moneymaker, and I don't mean that in a good way for the city, because what's happening then is that the folks that have these units, then they're getting charged every time someone comes out. So you could see 3 or 4 infractions.
You could.
And then you could come back 4 separate times, could you not?
You could.
Charge a fee every time.
And perhaps you have a lot of landlords in the audience tonight. Perhaps they could speak to how many times they've experienced being charged re-inspection fees better than I could.
Sure.
I was just, Jody wondered if it'd be possible to try to come up with some numbers on how much admin time, how much it costs per unit of just admin time versus out in the field inspection time, to kind of understand where we're at on that breakdown.
I can try to break it down farther. I did put together a memo for Andy regarding a number of different ways that we could charge admin, and trying to compute how much how much of our clerk's time is actually used for the rental housing. And basically we have 2 clerks in the health department, and one of them, their time is devoted to the building inspection side of the program and the rental housing. And so we usually just divide that in half. So 50% of her time would be spent on all the administration work for the rental housing program. And she is the senior inspector. And so for this fiscal year, I used a total compensation package for her. And her total compensation with benefits is $69,141. And so I guess we could divide that out over the cost of however many rental properties are being inspected that year. Because remember that we do our inspections once every 3 years. So we take that $2,800 or 2,800 rental property number divided by 3. And then that would be how many, on average, I suppose you could say you're inspecting maybe 1,000 rental properties by the time you get to a reinspection or new rentals that are coming in and things like that, just to have a round number.
Jody, did you get any sense from your own staff or the people that work in this department, their feeling about doing this, and what are the pros and cons from a staff perspective? Just, I guess I'm thinking, why would you farm something out and outsource it if we have people that can do it now and do a pretty good job? If there isn't a major cost savings,
I think I would have to let Kevin speak to that, because I did not talk to the staff about this. I was on vacation last week, so I didn't know until I came back that it was even on the agenda for this evening. So I don't know that our building inspection group has discussed it.
Kevin, has the staff had a chance to give you some input and feedback? Can you make some comments to that effect?
Yes, I've talked at length with staff about it, about doing the program that we're talking about after it was introduced and after we had some initial discussions about it and how their feelings are regarding it. Staff is not elated about it. There are a lot of concerns from different directions of staff. Some of it's administrative, some of it's service. I think what you see when you do these types of things with this type of a service is that you're not going to sever yourself away from it 100%. You're not going to be able to do that. You're still maybe going to be pulled into some situations. As Jody alluded to, we still have administrative duties here. We still have administration to perform, even if the inspection part of this was out of the house. So, I mean, typically when you look at privatization, there's going to be the kinds of things that you're going to do with privatization in local and state government where you see it. Even in federal, really, it's going to be an enterprise type services or fund type services where that it's a business type activity already. You're looking at water, solid waste, sewer, telecommunications, things that work like a business. There's a little bit more, or there's a large measure of human activity and interaction here. And consistency can be a question, right? In how you're performing that, whether or not that private entity is performing the same as you have over the years performed that type of a service. I think other than that, also, there are two driving components that would compel privatization itself in general, right? It's going to be, I can do it less expensively, or I can do it more efficiently and more effectively. One or the other, maybe perhaps both. Certainly from what Jody has presented to you, I don't think you're seeing a compelling notion of a savings in doing it out of house and doing this privatized. I cannot say one way or the other about service, of course. I do understand the gentleman that owns the company we're talking about is very qualified. His people are as well. I respect that. I see that. So are our personnel to some degree. We are training right now. I think you'll see in about a year to 2 years, we're going to be bringing on 3 guys who are getting up to speed, so to speak, in their qualifications. So we're a little behind on that right now. We're working forward with it. But those are some of the comments that you hear and some of the things that in the department that are kind of resulting from us looking at this. I wouldn't entertain any other questions, though.
Well, I think since our speaker has arrived, I'll ask Andy to introduce our speaker and let him make some comments, and then we'll take the questions and comments from the audience. So, Andy, if you would introduce
Sure. Mayor and Council, this is Jason Van Alsdahl with Iowa Inspectors. I referenced this at the beginning of the meeting. He heads up the rental inspection program that we talked a little bit about in Oskaloosa. And again, this is just to bring you up to speed in some of our previous conversations, sharing with Council whether or not that we would migrate to rental inspections from having that done in-house. So if you would, we have the spreadsheets here, but if you would, as you and I have talked about before in previous occasions, just share with us how the program operates, and then we can talk about some of the cost differentials.
You bet.
Sure.
Thank you for having me.
Speak right into the microphone.
Okay.
So we can...
Yep. Thank you for having me here, folks. Jason Van Osdal with Iowa Inspections. And I just wanted to have kind of a clear conversation with you folks about the opportunities to do contracted rental property inspections in the city. I've been doing them since 1999, started in Ankeny for a long, long time. Done them in Windsor Heights as well, and currently doing them in Oskaloosa and Colfax currently right now. The way the program kind of lays out is it's a kind of a partnership with the city. We work in concert with city staff. The city does and keeps their own registration program with any modifications that you might see fit to better fit the program. With that, a packet of information goes out to the property owners, and that packet gives them the ordinance, the checklist of what we'll be looking for out there in the field, contact information, email, text. We have a phone system set up for Iowa Inspections as well. And then they can call and ask questions. They have a certain, problem with egress or a window question or something like that. We want them to be able to call ahead of time or during the scheduling of the inspections and ask those pointed questions on what they have. Oftentimes they'll send us a picture of their issue and say, hey, will this pass? Hey, what would you think we should do about this? So that way we can have that clear conversation with them about what they need to do to bring that property up to speed to pass the city ordinance. With that, we can schedule them on the phone. We're actually setting up a website so that they can view our calendar. City staff can also view our calendar. to see when we're going to be in town. And they can look on there Tuesday at 2:30 or whatever, fill in their information through the website and request an inspection. Harrison, my son, wherever he's at, right there, he would take a look at that request for inspection, see that they have tried to schedule, let's just say it's 16 units in an hour. He knows from experience that they need more time than that. He would give them a call back and say, I see you're trying to schedule an inspection. What would you think about broadening this out to either ahead of time for 1 o'clock and allow 2 hours or something like that? And then, of course, having that conversation, what kind of units are these? What are you looking at? Do you have smoke detectors in every sleeping room? Having that communication work through helps out a ton when you're doing a rental inspection. With that, I would also say that they are able to get a rapport built with the inspector so that when they show up for the inspection, they know, who Harrison is, what he's going to be looking for, and then some of the frequently missed items out in the field. He would have a spiel of what he talks about: fire extinguishers, placement of fire extinguishers, smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, GFIs. He goes into detail about that, and then they have that conversation. Are you ready for it? Oh, well, I don't have any of that stuff, sir. Let's back that out to a couple of weeks so they can have time to get that taken care of. After that, he would show up on site and do the inspection. He also carries with him the paperwork of everything that the property owner would have gotten in the mail so that they can have a copy for reference. And let's just say that the unit or units pass. He would have the registration, which has their contact information up top, the building inspector, the rental inspector portion in the middle, and then the city staff admin portion down at the bottom. They are looking for that inspector's signature and fill out his certificate information for that rental golden ticket, if you will. They would then take that or mail that with their registration back to the city. And then with that, they're good for the compliance of the city ordinance for the next 3 years. So.
Mayor, I've got a question. And Jason, you and I talked about this previously, but we'll go back a little bit to the re-inspections, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
And when you and I talked, we acknowledged, or I shared with you, in visiting with the city of Ankeny, they said one of the challenges with Iowa inspectors was doing a number of re-inspections, and those re-inspections are not repetitive, but obviously each time you go out, you charge another fee. And I think we clarified that. One question that came to mind when you mentioned this at the meeting in Oskaloosa, I'm just looking through my notes. When you receive these pictures, either you or Harrison then receive these pictures of properties that need an inspection. If you're viewing this just on site, whether it's on a phone or a tablet or something such as that, when you go out, do you charge a reinspection fee then? Or are there sometimes when you look at the picture and say, this doesn't justify it?
Okay. Well, I want to clarify what you're saying. So we've been out to do the inspection.
Right.
And then he or she would have maybe a minor thing, missing a smoke detector or something like that. That is what we talk about, putting a small town feel into the rental inspection program. Harrison keeps a running tablet when he's out doing inspections. So let's just say you're doing a rental inspection and you forgot your smoke detector in one of the bedrooms. Okay. Not a big deal. For one thing, we keep a few of them in the car at all times, and we sell those back to the property owner so that they can pass at the cost that we buy them at Menards. Mm-hmm. Period. One and done. Pass it off, and you're good to go. There's no reinspection fee. If you have a minor item or two in the field that needs to be corrected, if he's going to be down there the better part of the day, he can do it a few different ways, and I give him the latitude to do it that way, or I do, and I'm out in the field. He can, let's just say you forgot your fire extinguisher, you need to run to the hardware store and you get one. Okay, great. He can take a picture of it on this countertop. Great, send it to me, and I'll pass your inspection. I'll swing back by, meet you there, and we're good to go. One and done, and no inspection, no re-inspection is charged, okay? The other thing that he does, which I think is very smart, is he sets up a Friday follow-up list so that if you've got a couple of little things, now I'm not talking about failing your inspection. You've got to rebuild your stairway, you've got a deck that's fallen off the house. that's a failure. You know, there's some lines in the sand, but if you've got some minor things to get taken care of, you'll let them know. If they can get that taken care of by Friday at like 3 o'clock or something like that, and send me a picture of that, then I'm going to go ahead and pass your inspection for these minor items and get it taken care of. That's what you were talking about.
That's
correct?
what I was getting at.
Right.
And what would constitute a minor item?
Yes.
Because, which I guess would be either your call
A
or
loose
even if it were our
handrail,
call.
maybe a broken window that they can run to the hardware store and get a new pane and get it glazed in or something like that. Something minor, not an egress issue,
Right.
Yeah.
So that wouldn't constitute a reinspection, and then by extension, it wouldn't constitute then.
No, if you can
charging
get
the
it
fee.
done and get it done in an expeditious manner, that's what we want. We want you to get it done.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
The other thing that comes involved with this is code enforcement. Inherently, rental inspections address a lot of code enforcement right off the bat. And we want that ordinance, and maybe we need to look at the ordinance, but we want the city code to address code enforcement for rental properties so that when we roll up to the curb, that rental inspection just started. If you've got a disaster in your front or rear yard, toys, junk, debris, grass, so on and so forth that we've all seen in every community, we want that to be addressed so that when we leave that rental property, the house hasn't been painted since 1920 and needs to get a pressure washed, whatever the case. If it needs to be done, we're going to call it out and it's going to get taken care of. We're also, since we live in a rainforest these days, we're going to be cognizant of the weather and also the seasons as well. So we're not going to have you out there trying to paint your house in November, but we are going to set a deadline that the city agrees to for a follow-up date to have that laundry list of outside items to be getting taken care of. So
If I can, I want to hog this conversation, but if we'll explore that a little bit further, and you indicated this at the meeting again in Oskaloosa, and that is there certainly seemed to be a component of code enforcement just based on the pictures you showed in Oskaloosa. Right. That seemed to be a pretty precedent.
Yeah.
The item I'm wondering, I think you've already answered this, but just for clarification, is as when you see code enforcement, let's just say infractions, you're not abating them, you're notifying what? I'm assuming the code people then at whatever city you're working with, but you're at least making note of them.
right, we are. And the city
Okay.
staff is able to see our calendar, do a calendar search on our calendar. Hey, he's been out to 405 11th Street to take care of this with Mr. Wilson. Good. That's what we want. We want that to happen. We want that because code enforcement have their job to do. Rental property shouldn't be one of those things. We're taking care of that in the field, and that's what we're getting paid for by that property owner.
All right, thank you. That's all I had, Mayor.
Are there some questions from council?
I have some general questions. I'm not sure that Jason can answer them. They're more, I think, geared toward Kevin Flanagan or Jody Gates. First one, it was mentioned, Councilperson Berg brought up the inspection fees and the administrative cost. Just out of curiosity, what would the administrative fee, what portion of that would actually be lost if we went to this program? In other words, what gain would we have from the city staffing perspective if we did away with the city doing the inspections as opposed to these folks doing the inspections?
Yeah, I'm trying to speak to that.
That's a great question. And honestly, it's a number that I haven't come up with yet. The closest I came up with was, if we just wanted to charge only for administration, then I think that we have to start with, the benefit hours rate of the clerk is doing the admin, and assign it out to however many rental properties are being inspected, and then put in some kind of a percentage number there for all the other little things that could happen or questions that could come up, or whatever you want to cover, if you want to cover that, and pull the inspection costs out of the total number. Because you have to realize that even though we're doing some admin every year, we're not doing $30 per unit of admin work every year.
Sure.
That's designed to, over the course of 3 years, also cover the cost of inspections. I can work harder at trying to get a number for you of some kind. I mean, I've started that, and to try to define what that number could be.
I think it would, for council's benefit, I think it would be good to know that number.
Okay.
I have a series of questions. I apologize in advance. Does the current staffing level for inspections meet the current needs over the course of the 3 years? I guess what I'm trying to ask is, do we hit the total inspections every 3 years that we need to?
We had been doing that. And in the last couple of years, we started falling behind, so that the 900 to 1,000 inspections we needed to do every year, we were missing it by 100 or sometimes more. And I thought that what the council was trying to implement, the 4 certified building inspectors who could also do rental housing inspection and code enforcement, were designed to help address that issue. Of course, that just got started this summer. And so we haven't really seen the overall benefit yet, but I guess I would think that 4 people who at any one time could be diverted to do rental if they're not doing new construction, if it's the middle of winter and code enforcement is pretty light, I would think that would be enough. Okay. Because up to this point, remember, we've only had 2.
Sure. So currently, we're just doing, please correct me if I'm mistaken, regardless of the number of kitchens, for instance, that are in a unit, we're only charging 1 flat fee for that unit. So that structure would only have 1 unit. So there isn't $30 per kitchen in there, or is there per kitchen unit?
It's a per rental unit.
Okay.
So I guess it is a per kitchen, because generally there's a kitchen with a rental unit, unless you're talking about just a rooming house.
Okay. So trying to, as much as possible, to compare apples to apples, there is a per unit cost in here for both the city of Ottumwa and Iowa inspections.
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. And I promise I'm getting to the end. In a previous meeting, it was mentioned that for multiple re-inspections, the city of Ottumwa doesn't necessarily charge for those re-inspections. Is my memory accurate on that?
It's accurate. I don't know the number of re-inspections that our inspectors actually do that they don't charge for.
Okay, so that's obviously a benefit to the landlords who are requiring those multiple re-inspections. Sure. that this program would not allow for, right?
Unless we're talking about the minor things that Jason was talking about. Okay, it wouldn't.
Okay, so last question, I promise. Is there any way for you to estimate the number of rental units in Ottumwa right now that are in violation in some form or fashion of the code that we have?
No, there isn't.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jody, while you're still here, you said earlier this evening that we have 28, almost 2,900 units in the city.
2885 as of the end of September.
Are those all, and are we sure we're catching all the landlords and units that are in the city?
No, that number are the registered rental units in the city, the ones that we have in our database that
so somebody could slide under the radar.
There have been people who have done that.
Jody, Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind, I've got another question just to follow up on that. Jody, when you were visiting before with council about, again, what essentially amounts to job costing, about not covering our expenses, but one of the ways it seems to me that we're, quite frankly, leaving money on the table, I've never heard of cities do this before, we're charging nothing on that first re-inspection. So we're charging nothing on that. So if we're trying to cover our cost, one would think that, and I don't think job costing in this is going to be applicable, but one would think at a minimum that would be something that one would take into consideration if we were trying to cover our costs, is it start charging, even if it's only $30 for that re-inspection. Because one of the items I know you and I've talked about is when you look at the organizational chart and you have the building inspectors, the rental inspectors, and the code people, it's not uncommon at all to see those three divisions, and you can have 3 to 4 to sometimes 5 people that are all doing that. So I'm not saying the rental inspection, the new plan that we have going forward is going to work. A concern, though, and you and I talked about this, would be when you have so many disparate people that are split up between so many divisions. Isn't that one reason why that we're on this 3-year cycle in terms of doing these inspections and re-inspections? Because while you're doing the inspections, as you know, you don't just march down that path, you're also doing re-inspections, and many of those. So I guess my question comes down to, how much ground are we going to cover if we're still doing an inordinate number of re-inspections and taking time away from doing the straight up rental inspections, not to mention the building inspections and the code enforcement? It just seems to me we need more people in those divisions to handle that task.
I guess I don't know how to answer your question. I'll say this, I don't think that we're going to have any greater number of re-inspections tomorrow than we do today. Charging for them or not charging for them. The staff does them if they're needed. And we've never, another issue is that the department's never attempted to charge enough money to cover the entire cost of the operation of that department, either through rental registry or food inspection program when we had that, or building inspection, or any of those. We try to charge enough to cover the cost of the inspection, but also realizing that an inspection program, a rental inspection program, construction inspection program is good for the community. It has that sort of benefit. So it has never been a mission that was given to me to charge a landlord exactly what it costs to do their rental inspection, or charge a resident exactly what it costs to build their garage and inspect for it. It was always sort of socialized. The cost that we didn't charge was socialized through the general fund.
Right, and I don't mean to belabor that. It's just in the conversation you and I've had, you've talked about what expenses come in and what revenue comes in to cover the expenses related to admin. I think Councilwoman Berg makes a good point, but that's a little bit difficult to cover. So that's why when someone talks about job costing in local government, that's kind of hard to nail to the ceiling.
It is, because we don't charge anything for the code enforcement, the nuisance code enforcement.
My only concern on that going forward, and I would want to hear more from council members and perhaps folks in the audience, is that, again, we have people split up. You and I have talked about split up with a number of responsibilities. And we haven't even talked about the follow-up you have to do administratively with the paperwork. And that struck me when I did the staffing analysis, looking back, as I said, to have a particular task, and it's split up between sometimes 2 and 3 and more people. It seems to me we'd be able to thrust more people against code enforcement if we're able to, quite frankly, free up. If we contracted out the rental inspection program, by extension, one would hope that you'd have more resources then to put it against code enforcement. You may recall it was about a year ago, and we've been waiting for, I think, over a year now. The fire department said they were going to participate with us. Remember those conversations, give us 2 rental inspectors. That conversation began in the spring of 2016, and we've not, and that's not blaming anyone, certainly not us, but that program has gone nowhere. And to the extent that it has, again, that old proverb, he who chases 2 hares catches neither. We have a small group of people, and they're all that are divided up to chase these 3 and sometimes 4 responsibilities. And we're just not putting enough resources against them, which I realize is a budget issue. But that's my concern, is freeing up more staff time to do, as I would argue, the code enforcement stuff.
Well, it's hard to separate the rental inspection and code enforcement piece. And I think, I know we've had some private discussions, Jody, about the number of times that some of our inspectors have had to go back.
Right.
And the time, especially if somebody doesn't keep an appointment, that's a wasted appointment for them. And it seems like it seems to have grown in the past couple of years. So we just need to be aware of that as a factor. That you're right, it blends together after a while. So, are there other comments from council?
I have just one other question, and this is directed towards Jason, if you don't mind. We've been talking, we actually talked a little bit before your arrival, so I guess my apologies for maybe putting you on the spot for this.
No.
We've heard in your presence actually quite a bit of discussion about where the city stands on the current inspection program, the view of the current city staff. And I guess my question to you and your company is if you can, you've told us what you do.
Mm-hmm.
Can you sell us on why your program is better than what the city is already performing?
I would actually put the example that's close to you as Oskaloosa. You've all spent a lot of time there, I'm sure, traveling through there and doing business there. You've seen what the housing stock used to be like years past. We've been doing them for just a little over a year, just a few months over a year right now. And if you've traveled up there recently, you may have seen a lot of improvements to the property. A lot of homes getting painted, a lot of pressure washing, a lot of decks getting done. I hear about it nearly every week from people when I'm there in town about the improvements that are being made. I don't know about what is or is not being done in Ottumwa at this point in time, but you've been doing rental inspections for how many years now?
Since the 80s.
Having an outsourced inspector that does not live in town, nor have any relationships with landlords, inherently provides a different type of a service. We are going to toe the line to the city ordinance at the direction of council, period. And with that, I will show you that we can provide a level of improvement to your rental housing stock throughout the city.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, at this point, I think we have a number of people who've asked to speak to the council on this topic. So when you come up, I am going to set a timer and keep you honest. So get to your point and make your point quickly, and don't ramble, please. First one is Keith Hill, rental inspections. Keith, come on up.
They can get one.
Thank you. I'm Keith Hill, co-president of Iowa Landlord Chapter here in town. We have been doing very well, I thought, for years with the Health and Inspection Department and the setup they had. Our fees were $25 per rental unit. Now they're $30, and that made a pretty good difference in our cost. But we have a good relationship with the inspectors, and as far as I know, we don't have that many more units in town to inspect. So I think that we've been doing fine with just the way we are with the Health and Inspection Department.
Okay.
Any questions?
Okay, thank you, Keith. John Scholes?
I've got one question. Have any of you guys ever been a landlord?
Yes.
Yes.
So you guys know some of the costs that we have in being a landlord, correct?
Yes.
All right. Have you looked into the negative effects of this? So let's say perhaps the fees go up. Will that bring any of the big companies in to have more housing in this area? Does that make sense? So here for what, 30 years, it's cost us $25 a month or $25 a unit. So now we raise it up to $30 a unit. Now what do you want to do? You want to raise it up to a minimum of an extra $75 a unit. What do you think some of that will cost some of us? Okay, first of all, we're in a low income area. Our amount on our rental units ain't as high as the other areas. Oskaloosa's is higher than ours. I'll tell you straight out, I couldn't take this. You guys would break me. Next to the housing authority, I'm probably the biggest landlord that you have here in town. So this is a fact. Do the math, $75, and that's if you don't charge us more. And then it sounds like to me after what he just said here, I mean, what's he going to do if he comes up to me and I've got a huge house and that house has to be painted? Okay, that house has to be painted. He's going to give me what, 3 months to get it painted? Normally, I don't paint my houses. Every bit of money that I make on doing a pawn shop, a car lot, and now we've ventured into other, we have a lot of stock in your guys' city. I can't do this, what this guy's going to do. I'll tell you guys that straight out. Every bit of money that I make, I roll back into my units. You look at my units. He comes to my units, most likely he's not going to find very much, but maybe a couple things to do, just like what he said. But if he hits me with a big one and I'm in a bad time where I can't take it because somebody else has destroyed a unit, it ain't going to work. The next thing is sitting back there, I could have said 30 things while you guys were saying all this out. But we are in a low income area. We're not getting the rent that's there that we need to do and to absorb $75 more a unit minimum. Do the math. I've got 25 units maybe. Take that times $75 a unit and see what you come up with. That's a pretty good dollar amount to swallow. So we try to make our units as if we would want to live in them to ourselves. We're not going to be at that standard. That standard's going to go down. Yeah, I don't see it working. So why should we have to absorb all this cost that we haven't needed in the past how many years? The next thing is how many cities are you doing this in?
Currently now 2.
Okay. How many cities have you did it in?
I've done it in Windsor Heights and in Ankeny.
What happened in Ankeny? Why ain't you there in Ankeny anymore?
They chose to go in-house.
Why?
City decision, council decision.
I think that's something that ought to be looked into too. Am I correct? No.
I let you know, I visited with city officials in Ankeny and I tried to dig.
Why did they have the changes?
Well, let me finish. I tried to dig as far as I could to find out what was it they liked and didn't like about Iowa inspectors. And he said it was a decision, administrative decision. They recommended the council to take that in-house. I'll be happy to give you the gentleman's number and you can visit with him yourself.
I'd like to have that.
Sure.
One of the other things too is sometimes there's common sense in this. You can't have an iron thumb on this, especially in this town. How many people are 75 to 80 years old that has a rental property and her husband's just died? Do you know how many of them I've went and looked at to buy? Okay, I look at this house and I'm thinking to myself, this house needs repainted. There's no doubt about it in my mind. You know, and I don't paint them, I side them because I ain't painting them again. She can't afford to do it. She's got enough stress on her plate with her husband dying. I mean, there's a lot more out there than just one person walking in there with an iron thumb and telling this 75-year-old lady that just lost her husband, no matter what, she's got to paint her house.
Okay, thank you, John. I think you've given us some things to think about. Inez Hill?
Yeah, my name is Inez Hale, and I'm co-president with my husband for Wapuro County Landlords. And they were talking about fees for reinspection. We've had our rental properties for several years now. We've never needed reinspection ever. And if something doesn't meet the required code, we've always been given 30 days to remedy it, and we've done it within the 30 days. So I'm not sure there's even any reason for reinspection. I don't know about the others. And we like the way things are right now. We're happy with the inspectors. We get along really well and always cooperate with what needs to be done. So we'd like to see it just left the way it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe Givok?
The last two speakers pretty much summed up most of what I was thinking, but I also wonder why we would send good jobs out of town. Why wouldn't we just keep our guys that are working here busy so they can get a paycheck?
Well, Mayor, sorry, I'll speak to that. No one's getting laid off, as I indicated.
I understand.
The folks that are handling, as I said, the three responsibilities now, those positions are not being limited. I will tell you, though, from a financial position, we are facing some struggles right now in the general fund in terms of that fund balance being where it needs to be. And there are going to have to be some cuts that are made, but as it relates to those folks right now, no decision has been made. We have other assigned areas for those folks.
Well, like John said, it's just adding more cost to us. Raise the inspection fee $5, hire another guy. There, you just created one more job. Obviously, it'd be more than $5, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for your comments. Scott Bailey?
Scott Bailey, I've been in the area for quite some time. One of the issues that I have is when there is an issue and you got different city departments and it's a gray area and somebody can't answer the question that you need, we don't need a third party from out of town adding to the complications. Somebody saying that's a gray area. If this third party says it's a gray area and they can't answer the question, who's going to answer it? Who do they answer to?
They ultimately would answer to the council, and quite frankly, we do have a process in place, and I think landlords should be aware of it. We meet on Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock. If there's an issue that needs to be resolved, we have engineering, we have planning and zoning, we have inspections, we have police and fire, we have legal, and they meet at 10 o'clock on Wednesday mornings to address issues that come up that are usually interdepartmental, because I've been concerned in the past that sometimes our citizens have gotten the runaround. Go talk to the engineers, go talk to planning and zoning,
Exactly.
go down to the clerk's office. So we put this in place, and I think it's worked very well. I mean, Kevin and his people actually host the meeting, and we invite people to come in and bounce things around with us, because we often learn from you folks some of the issues that come up, whether it's new construction, rehabbing, or whatever. So I think we try to at least hear from our citizens. And Kevin, if you want to make any comments, I think that's something we could ask you to respond to later, because I know we've had a number of people come in and just do that. We just had a person do it in the last couple of weeks. So,
Well, we as, with the health department doing this, as long as they have, they're perfectly competent in doing the job
so you're
that you're
happy with
asking
it?
for.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Greg Kenny. He wants to talk, well, it's a different topic, but
I'd be glad to discuss it.
why don't you come up and make your comments, because I just took them in the order they were handed to me. So come on up and make your comments, and I'll keep you on the same timeline as everybody else.
That sounds fair. Mayor and City Council, I want to raise the issue about the demolition that is not happening currently at the St. Joe Hospital site. Now, I want to remind the council that myself and my neighbors have been living next to a derelict for probably longer than 8 to 9 years. We were very encouraged. At one time, we thought that Blackbird was going to step in and get this done. They encouraged just a little bit here in the last couple of years by getting the project started and getting the demolition started back in April. But folks, the demolition, as you know, has not been completed, and piles of rubble are still surrounding the place. Every time the wind blows from a different direction, that wind carries particles of friable asbestos, silica around our neighborhood to be breathed in by not only myself and my neighbors, but my neighbors' kids. So something needs to be done, and done immediately, to get things going. We're right on the cusp of running out of a construction season. I don't know about the demolition season, but we're right up against it. I fear for not only those things I've mentioned, but also the fact that you've got a structure that still has its stairwells, open stairwells now because of the partial demolition, that people could climb, and I'm sure in the very near future some will attempt. So this needs to be addressed. Now, I think the first step would be with your health department. They need to take a look at the site and decide what needs to go. If they're looking for demolition, I think we've got local groups that could do that. Beyond that, we need to get started. We need to hold someone's feet to the fire to get this project, at least the demolition stage of this project, completed. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mayor, if I may, I will say that I've heard from several of the neighbors in the Van Buren area as well that they're having concerns about the demolition project also.
I would agree. It's been a very common theme, and this week I did send a letter to Blackbird Company. I'd received a copy of a letter from one of your neighbors, and I asked permission to send the letter in its entirety to Blackbird, and I just got a response about 3 o'clock this afternoon thanking me for the letter. There is a dispute between Blackbird and the demolition company. Their attorneys are talking to each other, but it is not resolved, and he said he would keep the city posted as to what they're going to do. But I raised the question last week about 3 weeks of no construction or demolition, and the same concerns about weather and timing, so appreciate that. Miriam, are you going to add something different? Says the same thing, St. Joseph Hospital.
Exactly. I just wanted to mention just a few things. First of all, I just would like to commend the people who have put in the water pipes around the area. That was a huge job. This particular company was efficient. They came in the morning, they worked, they made certain that we were informed about what was going on, and did that in a manner that allowed not only the neighbors to feel confident, but also knew that they were looking out for our best feelings and experiences with this, because it has been a difficult project, and they have worked very hard. And I wish I could say exactly the name of the company. It starts with a B. It's kind of like Byard or something, but excellent. And a lot of the fellas live between Ottumwa and Fairfield. Super people, very efficient, and that was a muddy, muddy time. And I think I've thought of a couple of inventions that we need to help them so the mud doesn't go all over. However, what's happened with the Blackbird situation has been bad. I have some photographs if you ever would like to see the wind and what it brought this summer through our neighborhood. Or I wish I could give you the sounds of the products that are piled up high when we had one especially severe wind as it hit our homes. And I know just personally that it does affect how you feel and whether you can be outside, but that's something that I think everybody has experienced there. Blackbird quit responding to me. Seth Sako was the manager and just a great, nice person. But primarily the excuses that I heard were that the machinery breaks down. People did not come to work every day. They started at various times. And sometimes I would ask, I even have called the city, who is managing this project? Because if I was the guy paying for some of this, I'd be very disturbed by the irresponsibility that I saw as far as continuing things. I had someone also suggest and have seen when there are demolitions like that there are trucks that have big sprays that come and put that on the top so that the dust would come down. And I suggested that to Blackbird. They came, but they would spray the bottom, not the top. And just things that you would, watch. And it's been a great disappointment. If I were to ask, when I have a tree that falls down, there are dead trees around there. We have lots of wonderful kids in our neighborhood. One tree, I know this is hearsay because I'm telling what happened with the neighborhood kids. But they were playing over at one place one time, and then, the next day, this huge tree came down, not from a storm, because it was rotten. And the only question that I got when I mentioned that to Blackbird was, did it fall over the fence? Well, it fell over the fence, and months later, it is still there. We also called because the grass was so tall, and finally someone came and mowed it, but it was after the request, I know, of several people who lived in the neighborhood. I could go on.
I'm going to call you
Okay,
short. Your
but
time is up.
I would highly suggest, and when I've even asked some people, in my perspective, this is a public nuisance.
Thank you, Mayor. Larry G. Vaughn?
Excuse me. I just have a couple things I want to address or mention. Correct me if I'm wrong, but did we not just state earlier this evening that the health department has expanded from 2 inspectors to 4? Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so.
Yeah, we have the same number of people. We had 2 code enforcement officers and 2 building inspectors. And now we have 4 people who are training to be building inspectors and do code enforcement as well.
Okay. So I would hope that we can handle that area, but I would just like to caution and express a concern. It sounds to me in sitting here, and I'm not in habit of doing this, but it sounds to me that there's a lot of unknown and doubt within the staff and maybe within the community that before something like this be ventured, that it be checked into very thoroughly, and we have the answers to all these questions that are coming up. I think that we owe that to our citizens and our community. We try to provide nice homes for rentals so that people have a nice place to live when they move into town, whether it be temporary or long-term. But yet, many times we tend to forget the homes of people that own their homes and live in them. And they might look 3 times worse than the rental house that sits next door to them. And the tenants don't understand why they're told to keep their place clean when the neighbor next door doesn't have to. But I just want to caution the council to examine everything thoroughly, before we move on and send more money out of town as opposed to keeping it in town. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Brooklyn, Leon?
Mayor.
Good
Council.
evening.
My name is Brooklyn Leon. I live on North Court. Thank you. So I just wanted to go over some of the things that were said tonight. The first thing that really caught my interest was when Mr. Flanagan said that the staff is not elated with this idea. If the staff were here to speak, I think that would be wonderful, but unfortunately, since they are not, we just have to go with that they are not elated, which I can tell that a lot of people in this room are not elated as well. So John really hit it on the nose whenever he assessed the cost. For someone with even a small number of units, the cost differential, it's a burden. It already has been raised, as it was said before, and I do believe that there would be other options that can solve this problem, if there is actually a problem, that could be done. Now, Jody had said that in the 900 to 1,000 properties that need to be inspected, they recently have started to fall behind. I believe she had the figure of around 100 units. So if the amount of units has not changed drastically and the amount of inspectors has not changed drastically, then I would suggest that it's possible that the inspections falling behind, the solution there is not to outsource and throw our hands in the air and say that another company could probably handle this better, but potentially that we could look further into the managerial aspects of what we're doing within our own departments. I understand that the budget restraints for the amount of time that our own inspectors have, we have limits to that. I understand that. But from that perspective, it's a financial issue. From this Iowa Inspections LLC, it's much more of a financial positive. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan Palin.
Name's Dan Palin. I'm in concern of this whole thing, all right, because you're just putting more money into the rental, and we're going to pass the savings right on to the renters that can't afford it now. We keep our houses very clean, very neat, and we would live in them ourselves. There are times that they go bad because of someone trashing the place. If we get an inspection right after someone trashes a place, we get nailed with a list so long that it's hard to bring that place back up to par. Now, it's what we have to do is we have to take it off our insurance as a rental being occupied to not occupied, because it's a difference on the insurance, or it's not covered. And a lot of landlords don't even know that if it goes a month and a half because someone trashes a place, it's not being insured because the insurance doesn't handle something that has already been non-occupied for over 30 days. Now, the other concern I have is there are other companies. Have you even looked to see if he was in the bid process? Is there another company that does it for $50? Have you even looked at another source besides him?
No, we have not. But
Isn't that kind of bad?
Well, no, we've not made a definitive decision on that yet. We've not looked at.
I know, but I mean, if you've
do it.
considered doing this, wouldn't it be kind of smart to consider how much it's going to cost by other companies? Not just one, but if you've only looked at one company, that's like saying I'm only going to call one plumber. You don't. You call around. You get different estimates.
Sure.
I'm a businessman, and you don't do business just by grabbing the first guy that looks good.
That's correct. But first of all, what we wanted to see was whether or not this was something council supported. It was a program they support, and there appears to be some support. And I know there's some staff folks that have their concerns about it, which is fine. But if it gets to the point where this is, if council decides, yes, they in fact do want to migrate then to rental inspections, at that point, then we are going to check other, quite frankly, price differentials. Also, his costs as opposed to some of the other entities that do it. I don't know. You probably have, at that point, have to put it out to request proposals. I know there are like some fire departments that do it. As it exists right now, staff is recommending, at least I am, staff is recommending this is something that the council looks into. If they decide that they do want to pursue rental inspections, you're right, at that point, we've got to see what other entities are out there that offer this.
Finish your comments, Dan. We'll.
He talked half my time.
I know. That's why I've said you finish your
Can
comments.
I say one more thing?
Sure.
Okay. Forget it. It's.
Well, I think I want to make two comments. Is there anyone else that didn't get a chance to address the council?
Can I say something else? Also,
Stand up so we can, I'll give you a couple more minutes because you already.
Rental properties have a market. And I had one of the rental inspectors say something to me one day. He says, you got to look at it. There's different markets. There's rentals that's up here, rentals that's down here. All right. So this number's asking people that's up here and down here to take the same number. So if a person's rental property is only going to bring $440 a month, and the other one on the top of it's going to bring, like a 2-bedroom house, going to bring $550, $600 a month at the max. How are they going to take this $75 cost and then this person up here take that $75 cost? Let's look at two different ways. But yet we have to have this market down here. We have to, because there's only people that can fit into this market. Our area, our rental has not, the dollar amounts haven't raised, but our cost has. Rental inspections has, bugs. We're dealing with more bugs now than we've ever dealt before. I mean, that cost has hit us huge. And it's because of what's coming in out of town that we're actually renting to now is bringing them in. And until that culture changes and gets into the culture that's here, we're the ones that's got to eat the price on it. It's not everybody else. There's the cost of goods is going up, but the rentals ain't going up.
Okay.
So keep it in mind for us, please.
I just want to make one comment that tonight was an opportunity to hear from you. There's no decision being made. We wanted to get some input from renters and landlords. We wanted to hear from Jason. I think if we weren't concerned, we wouldn't have held this special session. And, the gentleman made the comment, we certainly are not going to make a major decision with one person or one company. We would certainly look at getting appropriate responses. We would also check out with where they've worked before. So I think you can have confidence that your council is going to do a thorough investigation before anything is decided, and we'll certainly keep the public fully aware of what we're doing. So is there any other?
Your Honor, may I say something?
Certainly, Skip.
Did you folks get copies of this?
No, I told you, Skip. I told
Yeah,
you
we'll make copies
What I'm saying
available.
is, when we have a meeting like this, I'm saying they should have copies of it so they can do their own thing, is the only thing I'm saying.
Sure.
I can tell you that I'm far from making a decision on this. Some of these numbers on here don't make sense to me, and I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but it looks to me like in some places here, Iowa inspections, I don't know where these other costs are coming from. I'm not going to sit here and try to figure it out tonight, but I can't do it in 5 minutes. But it doesn't totally make sense to me. But I can tell you, I'm far from stating that we would go this direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Skip.
Oh, sure. If anybody wants the documents that they're looking at, can everybody hear me? This ain't not working. If anybody wants to view the documents that they're discussing, they are on our website. If you look at council documents, there's a public website that you can view all documents on for council. So it's just under this meeting, you'll be able to pull up that spreadsheet that everybody's discussing.
Thank you, Chris. This raises an issue because, again, I'm talking about, we're mixing apples and oranges. We're talking about the rental inspection program, but as we heard tonight, there's also issue of code enforcement that kind of comes up too. And I've had a number of complaints registered with my office about the nuisance on North Madison Avenue. And I'm not going to go into detail tonight, but I would like the council to visit with me or visit with our city administrator and get some information, because if we don't get some resolution on that, it will be on the agenda for discussion in the public in the very near future. I don't normally get that involved, but when you get 4 or 5 people that bring up the same issue, you have to pay attention, because one person may have a complaint, but it becomes a pattern of nuisance. And so I think I'll be glad to visit with council and give you some more detail, and we can have some discussion about that at a future meeting.
And for the audience's benefit, you know, one of the audience members asked if anybody on this panel had been a landlord previously or currently, and as a person who rents out property myself, I will say, just for the public's knowledge, you know, I'm sensitive to this as well. So I hope everybody understands that we will not look at this just from a purely financial perspective, but also for what's best for the community, because there is some personal investment in this from us as well.
I also wanted to say, when we had first heard Jason speaking in Oskaloosa, which is part of why it prompted the conversation, Oskaloosa had a lot of good things with their rental inspection program outside of just the inspections themselves that I think would be good for us to look at. Like they had an incentive where if your properties don't have any issues during their inspection, they can go to a longer list of time. That's something that I'd really like to look at, where you kind of get an all-star rating, to where you're also marketed in the community as an all-star landlord or an all-star property. Things that the people who are doing what they need to do, which are the people who are probably all here tonight and not the people we have concerns with, those people doing what we can do to promote and incentivize you for doing a good job, and seeing what we can do there. So the conversation for just kind of the rental inspection program, I think, has a lot more than just that part. It's what can we do to get the people who aren't doing what needs done regular, and we're talking habitually, not the one-offs where you had something trashed, or, you know, the ones that are continuously having issues. What can we do there? But also, what can we do positively to incentivize the people who are doing a good job?
That's a really good point. Thanks, Al. Kevin, did you want to make a comment?
I do want to make a point concerning where our status is right now, because we're talking a lot about what we're able to get done and what we're not able to get done. Right now, we're about 3 months back, and it's October, and we're about 3 months behind where we think we should be. But you know, we've got one of our inspectors, the newest inspector, is not really actively doing a lot of rental inspections. So part of the advantage that we were getting, it was a multi-part advantage that we were getting from going to having 4 people who were trained as building inspectors, 3 of whom would be doing a lot of code enforcement as well. We were picking up a little bit on our ability to do more code enforcement. And also we were going to make sure that we had 4 people around now that are building inspectors, while before we only had 2. So one's out, you're down to 1 in a community of 25,000. So there was a couple of different advantages there. But in the future, the training of that 4th person, the newest one, well, that happens. And then that person's also into that mix doing the rental inspection. So we're really not that far behind right now. But in the future, our capability to not be behind, I think, would probably be evident. But and that was part of where we were at originally when we were looking at it. I just want to make sure that everybody understood where we're at right now.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Okay, there's an item on the agenda. Is there any issue that hasn't been brought up tonight that you want to make the council aware of? Doesn't have to be rental, it doesn't have to be nuisance. Anything? Okay, hearing. Come up to the microphone. Identify yourself and then speak, and we'll give you
I have to identify myself. I'm Lester Denhardt. I hear about these financial constraints, and I know we have ag tax, we have Indian Hills tax. How about if we take all the difference between homestead exemptions and the price all these landlords are paying in property taxes and put that towards the health and inspections.
Well,
you're talking $150 to $182 per unit per year that all these landlords pay on rentals, that there is no homestead.
Oh, but good point. Good point.
And I want a copy of that. I do numbers.
Okay, thank you for that suggestion. We'll kick it around some more.
I said one other thing too.
We've given you
Just one other thing.
one last thing. Okay.
2,800 units that are rentals. How many of them are owned by the housing authority?
None.
None of them are?
Does not count housing authority.
All right.
Okay. Okay. At this point, since we did this as a special session, we're going to call a recess, and the council will reconvene down in 108, and we're going to talk about a contract. Has nothing to do with what we've talked about tonight. So thank you for your input. We appreciate your taking the time to share your ideas, and certainly talk to Kevin or Jody or Andy and give them some more information.